Pennsylvania, a land of rolling hills, coal towns, and battlefields drenched in history. But beneath its charming landscapes lies a shadow that never fades. From the haunted ruins of prisons where men begged for mercy, to ghost towns swallowed by time, to folklore whispered around campfires in the woods, you'll find that here. The past refuses to stay buried. Tonight, we'll step inside the darkest corners of the Keystone State. Listen closely, and maybe you'll hear the whispers of those who never left. 1. The Bonet Tavern, Bedford, PA. Along the old Lincoln Highway sits the Bonet Tavern, a colonial inn dating back to the 1760s. It has welcomed travelers, traders, and soldiers for more than 250 years. But beneath its warm glow and rustic charm lies a history soaked in violence and death and the spirits that refuse to leave. During the Whiskey Rebellion, angry farmers gathered here, and at least one man was reportedly hanged from the rafters. Guests since then have described seeing a figure swaying from the ceiling, only to vanish when they look again. In the cellar, the tavern once held prisoners, and today, visitors swear they hear chains clinking and low moans rising from the dark. Staff members often report objects moving on their own, or the sensation of unseen hands brushing against them. Doors slam shut with such force they rattle the old timber beams. And on the upper floors, guests have awoken to find a man standing at the foot of their bed, his face obscured, his presence oppressive. One of the most chilling stories comes from a couple who stayed overnight. They awoke to the sound of laughter, children's laughter, echoing through the halls at 3 But no children were in the inn. When they checked the hallway, it was empty, save for the faint sound of footsteps scurrying away. At Bonet Tavern, history, legend, and lingering energy blend into something palpable. Sit by the fire, and you might feel comfort, but sleep upstairs, and you may find the dead are far more restless than the living. 2. Braddock's Battlefield, Braddock, PA. Long before Gettysburg, Pennsylvania witnessed another bloody clash, the Battle of the Monongahela in 1755, where British General Edward Braddock led his troops against French and Native American forces. Nearly 900 men were killed or wounded here, and General Braddock himself later died from his injuries. Today, the battlefield is little more than a quiet stretch of woods and fields near Braddock, Pennsylvania. But the ground still remembers. Locals who wander the site at night report the distant thunder of musket fire, the cries of men, and the pounding of boots through the underbrush. Some have seen soldiers in ragged red coats materialize between the trees, only to fade back into the shadows. Others speak of a lone figure believed to be General Braddock wandering the field, clutching his chest as though still bleeding from his mortal wound. There are tales of strange mists rolling in without warning, chilling the air even on warm summer nights. A few hikers have even claimed to hear commands shouted in thick British accents, urging troops to advance. The voices grow louder until suddenly the forest is silent again, standing in the quiet dark of Braddock's battlefield. The sense of unfinished violence is overwhelming. You can almost feel the confusion, the panic, the horror that unfolded centuries ago. Some say the soldiers here never realized they had died and still march endlessly, seeking a victory they will never claim. 3. Pittsburgh's Allegheny County Jail, Pittsburgh, PA. Massive, gray, and foreboding. The Allegheny County Jail has stood since 1886, a fortress of stone and shadows. For more than a century, it housed some of the most dangerous criminals in Pennsylvania. But according to guards, inmates, and modern visitors. The jail is still very much occupied, even if not by the living. In the cell blocks, people report hearing heavy doors slam shut when no one is there, the clang reverberating like a final sentence. Guards have described seeing figures pacing the tiers, only for them to vanish when approached. Some have even claimed to hear the rattle of chains and the echo of desperate prayers whispered in the dark. One of the most infamous spirits said to haunt the jail is that of Charles Baldy Jack McCall, a notorious gangster who was executed here. His shadow is seen lingering in the corners, his raspy voice captured on recorders, threatening anyone who dares to challenge him. Lawyers and clerks working in the courthouse connected to the jail report strange encounters too. Phantom footsteps echoing down stairwells, papers mysteriously moved, and lights flickering in rooms long sealed off. It's as though the despair of those once imprisoned has seeped into the very walls. Standing in the jail at night, the silence is so thick it feels alive, pressing against your chest. You can almost hear the murmurs of the condemned, pacing endlessly in their cells. And you have to wonder, if you were locked in here, would you ever truly escape? 4. The Betsy Ross House, Philadelphia, PA. In the heart of Philadelphia stands a small brick home, charming by day but unsettling by night. This is the Betsy Ross House, where the legendary seamstress is said to have stitched the first American flag. But beyond its patriotic story lies something much darker. Visitors touring the house often feel sudden chills as they climb the narrow staircases, the air turning icy even in the summer heat. Some claim to hear the faint sound of scissors snipping or the rhythmic pull of a needle through cloth when no one is there. Others describe the apparition of a woman in colonial garb, her face pale, her eyes hollow, watching silently from a corner before vanishing into the walls. Staff members tell of strange footsteps echoing through the halls after hours, or doors opening and shutting on their own. One guide recalled hearing muffled sobs from the upstairs room, only to find it empty. Some even believe Betsy herself still lingers here, restless and bound to her home by unfinished work. There are darker whispers too, that not all spirits here are friendly. Guests have reported being touched, even shoved, by something unseen. A few have fled the house entirely, overwhelmed by the feeling that they were being followed from room to room. The Betsy Ross House stands as a reminder that history is never as clean as the textbooks make it seem. When you pass through its doors, you might not just be walking into a relic of America's birth, you could be stepping into the presence of a spirit that refuses to let go. 5. Hillview Manor, Newcastle, PA. On the outskirts of Newcastle, Hillview Manor looms like a sentinel of forgotten souls. Opened in 1926 as a poor farm, it later became a nursing home where hundreds of residents spent their final days. By the time it closed in 2004, the building had already gained a reputation for being alive with the dead. Inside, the air is heavy with the scent of dust and decay. Long corridors stretch into darkness, their walls lined with abandoned wheelchairs and hospital beds. Some visitors swear they've seen elderly apparitions shuffling across the halls, their translucent forms vanishing through locked doors. One spirit, known as Mary, is said to haunt the 3rd floor. She appears as an old woman in a hospital gown, quietly weeping. Paranormal teams have captured her voice on EVP, whispering pleas for help. In the basement, shadows are said to dart between the support columns, while the sound of heavy boots echoes from nowhere. Even more unsettling is the legend of a young boy spirit named Jeffrey, who tugs on people's clothing or rolls balls across the floor. He's playful, But many wonder if his innocence is only a mask for something darker. Investigators who spend the night often leave shaken, reporting oppressive feelings of dread and sudden drops in temperature. Some believe Hillview Manor is not haunted by a few lingering souls, but by the collective grief of everyone who died here. When you walk its silent halls, you can almost hear them all breathing, waiting, just out of sight. 6. Sachs Covered Bridge, Gettysburg, PA. By day, Sachs Covered Bridge looks picturesque, an old wooden span painted red, stretching across Marsh Creek. But when the sun sets, the bridge becomes one of Gettysburg's most haunted places. Built in 1854, it served as a crossing point for Confederate and Union soldiers alike during the battle. Legend says 3 Confederate deserters were caught here and hanged from the bridge's beam. Their spirits, some claim, never left. Visitors who walk its creaking planks at night often report the sensation of being watched. Some feel the tug of unseen fingers brushing their clothes or a cold hand clasping their wrist. Others describe sudden smells, gunpowder, tobacco, or even rotting flesh that vanish just as quickly as they appear. Drivers crossing the bridge have seen ghostly figures in uniform standing in the middle of the road, their faces hidden in shadow. As headlights pass through them, the figures dissolve, leaving only silence and the faint sound of rope creaking above. Photographers often capture strange mists that coil through the bridge even on clear nights, or glowing orbs hovering in the rafters. One tale tells of a man who heard whispered voices urging him to turn back. When he looked over his shoulder, the bridge was empty. Sachs Covered Bridge stands as a reminder that not all soldiers found peace after battle. And if you dare to walk through its shadowed passage after midnight, you might feel the weight of a rope tightening in the darkness above. 7. The Pennhurst Asylum, Spring City, PA. At the end of a narrow road in Spring City lies a decaying complex of red brick buildings. This was once Pennhurst State School and Hospital, opened in 1908 as an institution for the mentally and physically disabled. For decades, it became infamous for overcrowding, neglect, and abuse. When it finally shut its doors in 1987, it left behind more than empty rooms. It left behind echoes of suffering that refused to fade. Step inside, and you're met with long hallways where peeling paint curls like dead skin. Rusted hospital beds sit in rows, still strapped with leather restraints. Graffiti covers the walls, but beneath it, you can almost sense the weight of silence that once crushed the patients here. Investigators and thrill seekers describe disembodied screams that erupt out of nowhere, or the sound of dragging footsteps across broken glass. Shadows crawl across the walls as though the building itself is alive. In the underground tunnels, some have reported hearing children crying, their voices echoing through the dark, though no one is there. One chilling encounter comes from a paranormal team who captured a voice on recorder saying, "Get out." Minutes later, one member felt his arm violently pulled by something unseen. They left shaken, convinced that not all of Pennhurst's residents ever departed. The asylum is now a place for tours and haunted attractions. But make no mistake, the fear you feel inside is not staged. It's real. And when you hear that soft voice in the darkness whispering your name, will you answer? Or will you run? Allegheny, Gettysburg Battlefield, Gettysburg, PA. The fields of Gettysburg look peaceful now, rolling farmland under an open sky. But in July of 1863, this was hell on earth. More than 50,000 men were killed, wounded, or went missing in just 3 days. their blood soaking the soil. Some say the land itself has never healed, and neither have the souls who died here. Visitors often describe the sudden sound of muskets cracking in the distance, or cannons booming across the fields, only to fade into silence when no one is there. On foggy mornings, shadowy figures in tattered gray and blue uniforms have been seen marching in formation, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. Walkers on Seminary Ridge have reported soldiers stepping out of the mist only to dissolve when approached. One chilling account comes from a group of reenactors who stayed overnight near Little Round Top. They claimed a man in full Union uniform stumbled into their camp, muttering warnings about an attack. His clothes were bloodstained, his face gaunt. But when they turned back to speak with him, he was gone. Only the sound of distant drums lingered. The Devil's Den, a rocky outcropping, is infamous for strange photographs. Cameras malfunction, orbs of light hover, and ghostly figures appear in the background. Some visitors even report being touched or pushed by unseen hands. Here, death was sudden, violent, and overwhelming. Perhaps that's why the battlefield still echoes with unfinished business. If you stand alone on the fields at dusk, you might wonder, are you listening to the past, or is the past still watching you? Known Centralia, the burning ghost town. Imagine walking down a street where smoke seeps up from cracks in the pavement, and the ground beneath your feet feels warm, as if the earth itself is breathing. This is Centralia, a nearly abandoned town in Pennsylvania where an underground coal fire has burned since 1962 and will likely burn for centuries to come. What remains is more than just a ghost town. Locals who once lived here speak of eerie apparitions moving through the rising steam, shapes of people long gone, wandering the streets as though they never left. Some drivers along Route 61, the highway now nicknamed Graffiti Highway, claim to have seen shadowy figures cross the road, only to vanish into the smoke. The fire forced almost everyone to evacuate, but a handful of residents refused to leave. They tell stories of hearing phantom voices calling their names in the night, and doors slamming in empty houses. Others report strange glowing lights that hover above the smoldering ground, flickering like lanterns carried by invisible hands. The silence of Centralia is deafening, broken only by the hiss of steam escaping from fissures in the earth. It feels less like a town and more like a gateway where the veil between the living and the dead has thinned. Would you walk through its empty streets, knowing the fire below is eternal and the ghosts above may be, too? 10 Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia, PA. The towering stone walls of Eastern State Penitentiary rise like a fortress against the city's skyline. From the outside, it looks like a medieval castle, but inside, it was once one of the most feared prisons in America. Built in 1829, this was the birthplace of the penitentiary system, where inmates were locked in solitary confinement for nearly 23 hours a day. Silence was enforced with an iron fist, and many prisoners slipped into madness. Visitors today report hearing the same screams that once echoed through its endless corridors. Guards and tourists alike have described footsteps pacing behind them, even when they're completely alone. In cell block 12, shadows move where there should be none, flickering across the crumbling walls like figures caught between worlds. And in cell block 4, a notorious whisper is often heard, ragged, breathless, like someone leaning close to your ear. Perhaps most chilling is the story of Al Capone, who spent time here in 1929. Even the legendary gangster couldn't escape the torment. He claimed he was haunted by the ghost of James Clark, one of the men murdered in the St. Valentine's Day massacre. Night after night, Capone was said to cry out in terror, begging for the voices to leave him alone? Would you dare walk those silent hallways after dark, knowing the walls themselves have absorbed almost 2 centuries of suffering step too close? And you may feel a hand brush against you cold, unseen, and eager to remind you that this prison never truly released its captives. When the lights go out and silence settles, remember Pennsylvania's shadows are never truly empty. The prisons, the battlefields, the forgotten houses, they don't just hold history. They hold eyes that still watch and voices that still whisper. Tonight, when you close your door, listen closely. You might find the echoes followed you home. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this chilling journey, don't forget to like, comment with your favorite haunted location, and subscribe for more weekly videos from the shadows.